Nobody at the prestigious Boston Academy knew that the black substitute teacher they'd been dismissing for months was about to solve a mathematical equation that had stumped MIT professors for over a decade. Before we get to this wonderful story, please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Now let's get back to the story. Dr. Keisha Williams, 34, had been working as a substitute teacher at Whitman Preparatory Academy in Boston, Massachusetts, for 8 months. Every morning, she walked through the marble corridors of one of the most elite private schools in New England, teaching whatever subject needed coverage that day. To the wealthy parents and tenured faculty, she was just another temporary fill-in, a black woman without the pedigree they expected from their institution. But what nobody at Whitman Prep knew was about to change the world of mathematics forever. It was a cold Tuesday morning in February when the crisis hit the advanced mathematics department. Professor Charles Henderson, who taught the school's most gifted seniors, had suffered a heart attack over the weekend. The substitute coordinator, Mrs. Patricia Morehouse, was frantically trying to find someone qualified to handle calculus and advanced mathematical theory. "We've called every certified math teacher in the district," Mrs. Morehouse announced to Principal Robert Ashford in his oak-paneled office. "Nobody is available on such short notice, and these students are preparing for their MIT and Harvard applications." Principal Ashford rubbed his temples. The parents paying $60,000 per year in tuition expected nothing less than Ivy League preparation. "What about that substitute who's been covering various classes? What's her name? Williams?" Mrs. Morehouse looked skeptical. "Keisha Williams? Sir, she usually covers elementary subjects or basic English. I don't think she's qualified for advanced mathematics." "Does she have teaching credentials?" Ashford asked impatiently. "Yes, but then she'll have to do until we find someone permanent." That's when something extraordinary was about to unfold. An hour later, Keisha stood outside room 312, Advanced Mathematics, holding a lesson plan she'd never seen before. Through the glass door, she could see 18 of Boston's most privileged teenagers, all destined for Ivy League schools, chatting confidently about their college prospects. She took a deep breath and entered the classroom. The conversation stopped immediately as 18 pairs of eyes assessed her with barely concealed skepticism. "Good morning, class. I'm Ms. Williams, and I'll be covering for Professor Henderson while he recovers." A blonde girl in the front row, Madison Cabot Pierce, raised her hand with practiced entitlement. "Miss Williams, what's your background in advanced mathematics? We're working on differential equations, and my father says we can't afford to fall behind." Keisha smiled calmly. "I have sufficient background to help you continue your studies, Madison. Now, let's see what you were working on with Professor Henderson." She approached the whiteboard, where Professor Henderson's last lesson remained untouched. Complex equations filled the board, work on advanced calculus that had been building toward something significant. "You haven't seen the biggest surprise yet?" As Keisha studied the board, her expression changed subtly. Years of hidden expertise began to surface as she recognized not just the equations, but the deeper mathematical problem Professor Henderson had been attempting to solve. "Interesting," she murmured, more to herself than to the students. "What's interesting?" asked Trevor Worthington, son of a federal judge, his voice dripping with condescension. "Are you able to understand Professor Henderson's work?" Keisha turned to face the class, her eyes now showing a sharpness that hadn't been there moments before. "Your professor was working on something much more significant than standard calculus review. This appears to be preliminary work on the Millennium Problem, known as the Navier-Stokes equation." The classroom fell silent. These students were smart enough to recognize that name, one of the 7 most important unsolved problems in mathematics, worth $1 million prize to whoever could prove it. Madison frowned. "That's impossible. Professor Henderson never mentioned anything about millennium problems." "Because," Keisha said, walking to the board and pointing to specific sections of the equation, "he was probably building your foundational knowledge before revealing what you were actually working toward. This sequence of problems isn't random. It's a systematic approach to understanding fluid dynamics mathematics." What happened next left everyone speechless. Keisha picked up the marker and began writing on an empty section of the board. Her hand moved with absolute confidence, creating mathematical notations that flowed like poetry to anyone who understood advanced mathematics. "The issue with Professor Henderson's approach," she said, continuing to write, "is that he was using traditional methods to attack a non-traditional problem. But if we apply a combination of harmonic analysis with certain aspects of partial differential equations." The students watched in growing amazement as Keisha filled the board with mathematics that went far beyond anything they'd seen in their 4 years at Whitman Prep. Her work was not only sophisticated, it was elegant, innovative, and completely original. Trevor pulled out his phone and started recording. "This is insane! She's actually solving parts of it." "Put that away," Madison whispered, but her eyes remained fixed on the board. "I think we're watching something incredible happen." After 20 minutes of intense mathematical work, Keisha stepped back from the board. She had not only continued Professor Henderson's work, but had advanced it further than anyone at the school had thought possible. "Of course, this is just theoretical progress," she said, as if she hadn't just potentially made mathematical history. "For your actual assignment today, let's work on these differential equation practice problems." But the most shocking revelation was still coming. The students were too stunned to focus on basic calculus. Finally, Madison raised her hand again, this time with genuine respect rather than skepticism. "Miss Williams, where did you study mathematics?" "That work on the board. It's graduate-level research." Keisha paused, clearly deciding how much to reveal. "I have some background in advanced mathematical theory." "Some background?" Trevor pressed. "Ma'am, my father knows professors at MIT who couldn't do what you just did." That's when the classroom door opened unexpectedly. Dr. Jennifer Martinez, the head of mathematics department, entered with a stern expression. She had heard rumors that a substitute teacher was attempting to teach advanced mathematics and had come to assess the damage. "Miss Williams, I need to speak with you about Dr." Martinez stopped mid-sentence when she saw the whiteboard. Her face went pale as she recognized not just the complexity of the mathematics, but the breakthrough nature of the approach. Who did this work?" Dr. Martinez asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Miss Williams did," Madison replied proudly. "She's been solving the Navier-Stokes equation." "Wait until you see what happened when MIT found out." Dr. Martinez moved closer to the board, her eyes scanning each equation with the expertise of someone who had spent decades in mathematical research. This is revolutionary. The application of harmonic analysis to fluid dynamics in this configuration, I've never seen anything like it." She turned to Keisha with a mixture of shock and professional excitement. "Miss Williams, I need to ask you directly. What is your educational background?" The entire class leaned forward, sensing that something monumental was about to be revealed. "I have a PhD in applied mathematics from Stanford University," Keisha said simply. "My doctoral dissertation was on theoretical approaches to unsolved problems in fluid mechanics." The silence was deafening. Dr. Martinez stared at her in disbelief. "You have a PhD from Stanford? Then what are you doing working as a substitute teacher?" Keisha's smile was tinged with years of frustration. "Because having a PhD in mathematics doesn't guarantee academic employment, especially when your name doesn't match what hiring committees expect to see." Dr. Martinez was still processing the mathematical work on the board. "Miss Williams, you need to understand, this work could be groundbreaking. Have you published any papers on this approach?" "I've tried. My research has been rejected by 7 major mathematical journals over the past 3 years. The reviewers typically question whether I properly understand the foundational concepts. But there was something even more shocking Keisha hadn't revealed. Dr. Martinez pulled out her phone with trembling hands. "I'm calling Dr. Robert Chen at MIT immediately. He's been working on Navier-Stokes applications for 15 years. He needs to see this." "Dr. Martinez," Keisha said calmly, "before you make that call, there's something you should know." "What?" "Dr. Chen has been rejecting my research papers for the past 2 years. He's the primary reviewer who questioned my fundamental understanding of advanced fluid dynamics." The irony was stunning. The same professor who had dismissed Keisha's written work was about to be called to witness her breakthrough in person. Within an hour, Dr. Martinez had contacted not just MIT, but Harvard, Columbia, and Stanford. Word spread quickly through the mathematical community that someone had potentially made significant progress on one of the most challenging problems in mathematics. By afternoon, 3 professors had driven from MIT to Whitman Prep to see the work firsthand. Dr. Robert Chen arrived with a team of graduate students, expecting to debunk what he assumed was amateur mathematics. Instead, he found himself staring at some of the most sophisticated mathematical reasoning he'd ever encountered. The biggest shock was still to come. "This is impossible, Doctor," Chen muttered, studying the board for the 4th time. "The integration of these theoretical approaches, it's beyond what most of my graduate students could conceptualize." He turned to face Keisha, who was quietly grading papers at the teacher's desk while MIT professors examined her work. "Dr. Williams, I owe you a profound apology. I've been reviewing your papers for 2 years, and I never really saw them." "You saw my name and my institutional affiliation," Keisha replied without looking up from her grading. "Or rather, my lack of prestigious institutional affiliation." Dr. Chen felt the weight of his unconscious bias hit him like a physical blow. "Your papers, they were always submitted under K. Williams with no photo, no institutional letterhead from a major university. I made assumptions. You assumed that innovative mathematical thinking only comes from certain types of people in certain types of institutions," Keisha finished. "It's a common assumption in academia." By evening, word had reached the Clay Mathematics Institute, the organization responsible for the Millennium Prize problems. Dr. Andrew Wiles himself, famous for proving Fermat's last theorem, requested copies of Keisha's work. What happened next shocked the entire mathematical world. 3 days later, Keisha received a call that changed everything. Dr. Margaret Foster, director of the Clay Mathematics Institute, was on the line. "Dr. Williams, I've had our top mathematicians review your approach to the Navier-Stokes equation. While we cannot yet confirm a complete solution, your methodology represents the most significant progress on this problem in over a decade." Keisha sat in her small apartment in Cambridge, still processing the magnitude of what was happening. "What does this mean?" "It means we'd like to offer you a research fellowship to continue this work with full institutional support. It also means that MIT, Harvard, and Stanford have all contacted us about offering you faculty positions." The same institutions that had ignored her for years were now competing to hire her, but the most shocking call came from Dr. Chen at MIT. "Dr. Williams, I've spent the weekend reviewing not just your recent work, but all the papers I rejected over the past 2 years. Every single one contained insights that I completely missed. I was so focused on credentialism that I ignored brilliance." He paused, clearly struggling with his next words. "I'd like to offer you my own position as department head of applied mathematics at MIT. I think it's time I stepped aside for someone who actually deserves it." 6 months later, Dr. Keisha Williams stood at the podium of the International Congress of Mathematicians in Paris, France, presenting her completed proof of a major component of the Navier-Stokes equation to an audience of the world's most brilliant mathematical minds. The same work that had been rejected by journals when submitted by a substitute teacher was now being hailed as one of the most important mathematical breakthroughs of the century. In the audience sat her former students from Whitman Prep, now college freshmen who had traveled to Paris specifically to watch their former substitute teacher make history. Madison Cabot Pierce, now studying mathematics at Harvard, raised her hand during the Q&A session. "Dr. Williams, you taught us that mathematics isn't about where you come from, but about the clarity of your thinking. How do we ensure that other brilliant minds don't go unrecognized the way yours did?" Keisha smiled at her former student. "By remembering that genius doesn't announce itself with credentials or pedigree. It announces itself with the quality of ideas. Our job is to learn to recognize brilliance wherever it appears." Dr. Chen had resigned from MIT and started a foundation dedicated to identifying overlooked mathematical talent in non-traditional settings. "Dr. Williams taught me that the most important qualification for recognizing genius is humility," he said during his resignation speech. Whitman Prep established the Keisha Williams Fellowship, providing full scholarships to mathematically gifted students from underserved communities. Principal Ashford, who had initially assigned Keisha to advanced mathematics reluctantly, now spoke at conferences about the importance of recognizing talent regardless of its packaging. Mrs. Morehouse, the substitute coordinator, had completely overhauled her approach to teacher placement. "We now focus on qualifications rather than assumptions," she explained to the Boston Globe. Dr. Williams taught us that extraordinary people often hide in ordinary positions. The 18 students from that advanced mathematics class had all been accepted to Ivy League schools. But more importantly, they had learned to question their assumptions about intelligence and worth. Trevor Worthington, now at Princeton, wrote in his admissions essay, "The most important lesson I learned in high school came from a substitute teacher who showed me that brilliance has no color, no social class, and no predictable appearance." 1 year after her breakthrough, Keisha received a letter that brought her journey full circle. It was from Dr. Sarah Kim, a young Korean-American mathematician who had been working as a night janitor at Columbia University while trying to get her research published. "Dr. Williams, I saw your story on the news, and it gave me courage to approach the professors whose offices I clean. I've been working on applications of topology to quantum computing, but no one would take my work seriously because I'm just the cleaning lady." The letter continued, "Yesterday, I was cleaning Dr. Peterson's office when I saw he was struggling with a proof. I left a note showing him a different approach. This morning, he offered me a position as a research assistant. He said my insight was exactly what his team needed." Keisha smiled as she finished reading. "P.S. I enrolled in the mathematics program at Columbia. My advisor says my night job gave me access to mathematical conversations that most students never hear. Sometimes being invisible is the best education you can get." At the 1-year anniversary celebration of her breakthrough, held at MIT, Keisha addressed an audience that included mathematicians, educators, and policymakers from around the world. "A year ago, I was dismissed as just a substitute teacher," she began. "Today, I want to talk about all the other just a people we encounter every day. Just a security guard who might be a brilliant engineer. Just a cafeteria worker who might be a gifted poet. Just a janitor who might be the mathematician who solves the next great problem." She looked out at the diverse audience, many of whom had traveled from around the world to hear her speak. The Navier-Stokes equation taught us about the unpredictable flow of fluids. But there's another unpredictable flow we need to understand: the flow of human talent. It doesn't follow the channels we expect, it doesn't respect the boundaries we create, and it certainly doesn't limit itself to the institutions we consider prestigious. In the front row sat the students from Whitman Prep, now in their second year of college. Madison had switched her major from business to mathematics education, inspired to ensure that future generations of students learn to recognize genius in all its forms. Dr. Martinez, who had discovered Keisha's breakthrough that day, was now running a program to place qualified mathematicians in substitute teaching positions, creating opportunities for both schools and overlooked researchers. This story teaches us that brilliance is often hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone brave enough to look beyond surface assumptions. Keisha Williams spent months being underestimated, not because she lacked talent, but because others lacked the vision to see it. The students at Whitman Prep learned that their teachers might know more than anyone imagined, and that respect should be based on competence rather than credentials. Dr. Chen learned that the mathematical community's greatest weakness wasn't lack of talent, but failure to recognize talent when it doesn't come in expected packages. Most importantly, Keisha proved that persistence and excellence eventually overcome prejudice, but only when someone finally creates the opportunity to demonstrate that excellence. So ask yourself, who are the unrecognized experts in your world? The substitute teacher might be a researcher, the teaching assistant might be a genius, the quiet person in the corner might be the one with the breakthrough idea. True progress happens when we stop judging people by their current position and start evaluating them by their actual capabilities. When we realize that the next great discovery might come from the person we least expect. Thank you very much for listening. Please let us know what you think of this story in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any other videos.